Welcome, Bronco Nation. This very exciting series. I got Ron Counts on today, and we're going to be discussing a little series I'm liking to call 10 and 10, where we're going to be covering the top 10 questions facing Boise State football in 10 separate, right about 10-minute segments. I'm, of course, Bronco Blamar. With me today is Ron Counts from the Idaho Statesman. For great Boise State coverage all season long, make sure that you follow Ron. Make sure you follow Idaho Statesman on Twitter. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, of course. And then Ron is also going to be writing an accompanying article with each of these videos, going a little bit more in depth about what we discussed today. So make sure that you go and subscribe to the Idaho Statesman as well, so you don't miss out on any of that great content. Thank you all for being here, and let's get to the questions. All right, so our question for today is number 2. And if you didn't watch the first video, make sure you go back and watch. It was a great discussion on Taylor Green and how to stack up against the rest of the group of 5 as being a top-level quarterback. But looking today, we're going to be looking at, will Boise State break their single-season rushing record? And as part of that is, who will be the main one carrying the load? So first off, what is the record for Boise State? Well, you got kind of 2 ways to break this down. The way Boise State breaks it down, their record book is by most yards per game in a season. So if you're looking at that number, it's 250.2 yards per game. That was in 1979. Or you can look at total yards overall. And I'm going to look at specifically the FBS on this one. And again, Boise State doesn't actually provide this record, so I had to do the workload to actually find this. I went through ESPN, Boise State's own website, and also Sports Reference to get these numbers together. But the final answer on that is 2014, 2,994 yards total. They had 3,379 yards gained. They lost 385 yards that season, so that's where the total of 2,994 comes from. Top rushing leaders that year were Jay Ajayi, 1,800 plus yards rushing, and Grant Hendrick, 592. Looking at last season, they were actually really close to breaking that record. 2022 had them at 2,794 yards rushing, double what they did in 2021. And Halani, Genty, and Green were the top 3 leaders on that. Halani with 1,157, Genty with 821, and Green with 586. So whether you're looking at yards per game over season or overall number, total yards total in FBS, do you think Boise State's going to be able to break this record? The first part that we're looking at is who will be the main carrier of the load in reaching that goal. So Halani, Genty, Green, it was a big talking about Halani coming back this season when he could have gone pro. He decided to come back, and now you basically have 2 running backs that are at starting level for Boise State. So who do you think ends up taking the load of the carries here for Boise State this year?
That's a really interesting question because they're both stars in their own right. You know, they're similar in the aspect that they can both run through a guy. They're both strong enough and powerful enough to break tackles. I think Halani is still a little bit more shifty than Genty at this point. Genty is just a violent, physical downhill runner. I mean, that kid has got such a bright future. I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and give the answer away. I wouldn't be surprised if Genty does carry a little bit more of the load this year. I think Halani is that guy that he's got the talent, he's got the skill, but he's got some wear on the tires. He's had some injury concern. You know, I think maybe they're going to use him a little bit less. If I had to break it down, I think Halani gets between 12 and 15 carries a game. Genty probably gets in that 12 to 15, maybe 18 carries a game. And then, like I mentioned in the last video, Bush Hamden wants Taylor Green running the ball 10 to 12 times a game. So really, you're looking at 35, 36, 37 rushing attempts in one game. And that's not unheard of. Boise State averaged in the mid-30s rushing attempts last year. So I think they have a daggone amazing trio in that backfield. I think George Halani is a guy that could almost be used as a third down back because he's so shifty, he's so quick, he really catches the ball well out of the backfield. I think Genty is that guy that you bring in on first and second down and you just say, run over some dudes, you know, get your work in, put your shoulder pads down and just go. So the more those guys grow, the more game experience Genty gets, he's just going to be so dangerous. And I've seen him several times this summer, and he is even more jacked than he was last year. I mean, he looks like he's been living in the weight room. So he's going to be really hard to tackle. He does a great job of playing with low pad level. That's why nobody can get a clean shot on him. So I think he's a violent runner, a strong runner, and I think he's in for a really, really special season.
It is definitely weird for Boise State here. It's a little bit of a different scenario that they've had in the past, because in the past, Boise State's usually had 2 great backs on the team, but one's usually been the primary unquestioned starter, and the second has been the developmental back. I mean, think about when Jeremy McNichols and Alexander Madison were on the roster together. That kind of level of where one is a clear starter and the other one is getting there, or DJ Harper and Jay Ajayi. So this is one of those weird situations where you basically have two starting backs on the roster. The only other time I can think of a similar situation is that 2009 season where you had Jeremy Avery and Doug Martin both there, able to carry the load equally. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see who ends up taking the majority of the carries. You're saying you think that Genty will probably get a few more because he's a little bit younger and fresher, but you expect them to still get both of those primary roles. Do you think they're going to give Helani the honor of the starts most games, kind of given that senior ability, and then put Genty in when there's a little bit more of a when they have to take him out because of fatigue? Or do you think they're going to be basically just kind of whoever's game it is, 50%, 50%, they're both the starters, whoever's hot, keep feeding the back?
I think as long as he's healthy, Helani will get the starts. In part because there's such a history there of success. He has 7 career 100-yard games, and Boise State is undefeated in those games. They've never lost when he's gone over 100 yards. So he's a dynamic talent, and this is probably his last year of college ball. I mean, he's going to go pro this year. So, yeah, I think he gets the start, but I wouldn't be surprised if, say Helani gets, the bulk of the carries in the first 2 series, and then Genty comes in and takes several series from him. Because I just think Genty is such a physical runner, and they want to keep Helani fresh for late in the game. So I think they bring in, that they kind of use Genty as kind of the bulldozer and just run over people. And then when they need that finesse guy, they go to Helani.
Now, Boise State, at least last season, especially with the heavier running workload, was really leaning on a third running back as well. Who do you see stepping up to be that third ball carrier, maybe being developed as the second string guy for next season? Guys that jump out to me, of course, is just Dudley. He's had some hype from him. He's highly recruited, and he had some experience last season. Dubar, he's the highly recruited guy this year that everyone's going crazy over, Jean-Barry Dubar. And then also you've got seniors on the roster like Tyler Crow. Who do you expect to potentially take that third role?
I think it's going to depend on the situation. If they need a short yardage back, that's Tyler Crow. Tyler Crow's an awesome dude, love his haircut, but he's a bit of a one-trick pony. He's a downhill runner. He's not going to make guys miss. He's not going to catch the ball real well out of the backfield. He's that guy that you bring in on 3rd and 1, on 1st and goal, when you need that big yard. Dudley is an interesting guy. I think, number one, Caden Dudley is going to be their top kick returner again this year. He's such a dynamic athlete. He's very shifty. He's not the biggest guy, so he's not a guy that's going to come in and carry the load. But if you're in a 3rd and long and you need a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield and make somebody miss, maybe they bring in a Caden Dudley. Now, I'm not sure what we're going to see out of Dubar this year because he had a pretty ugly injury during track season, and he may still be rehabbing that early in the year. So maybe we see him late in the season. But I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him back and he redshirts and we don't see him much till next year. Another name to look out for in the future is Ethan Makita, Eagle High School grad, local guy, really big, powerful, strong runner, heck of an athlete. He had some scholarship offers and decided to walk on to Boise State a couple of years ago. So he's the type of player that Boise State loves. He's that blue-collar guy. He's going to work hard. And I think eventually he gets some carries. Is that this year? Probably not, because there's just not enough carries to go around. Helani, Genty, Green are going to eat up a lot of them. Tyler Crow's going to get those short yardage runs. Maybe Caden Dudley comes in. But I don't know what we see out of Dubar this year. I think he's got to get healthy first.
So you're looking at one of these backs getting 1,000 plus, and then some combination of 1,000 between Green and Genty, or Green and Helani, the other back. So is that enough for Boise State to break that record? We're looking at around 3,000 yards rushing on the season to beat the FBS record, or over 251 yards is basically where you need to be at per game to break the 1979 yards per game record. So do you think, based on what we've discussed, and a lot of it will depend on the Busham's offensive style, which will be our next question discussion. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that video and that article. But do you think that this is enough to break that record?
I think it is, based on how close they were last year to breaking it. I mean, you look at their total yardage last year, 2,794 yards, not far off from that record. Overall in the regular season, they averaged 196.4 rushing yards a game. But in the second half of the season, in the final 10 games of the season, they averaged 226.8 yards a game. So we saw what they can do. And again, Green is only going to get stronger and faster. Genty is only going to get stronger and faster. Helani is going to get so much smarter. He's a grown man now. He's a professional athlete now. He's going to play smart. So in my opinion, do they break the record? Yes, absolutely.
Well, whether they break that record or not this year, I think that Boise State fans can expect a lot of running and a lot of exciting plays because you've got the three horsemen of Boise State right now there in Green, Genty, and Halani. I mean, two running backs and a quarterback who are just probably the best overall running athletes that Boise State's ever had on a team at one time. So it's going to be an exciting season. Make sure you guys stay tuned for our next video. We'll be discussing Bush Hamden's offense and what it will look like. Some great insight here from Ron on that. And he's also going to be writing an accompanying article as well. So again, make sure you like, subscribe to my channel. Also make sure that you like and subscribe to Ron and also the Idaho Statesman as well, so you don't miss out on any of those great videos, great articles. So thanks so much for being here. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and go Big Blue.